right, looks like you're all here, and we're glad you're here. We're anxious to talk about Pinnacle Bank Arena another time, especially with a report. We're here today basically to share some good news about a recent report of the Pinnacle Bank Arena operation. In June, the West Haymarket Joint Public Agency, you may remember, hired Venue Solutions Group to examine the arena's finances and operations, and they have issued a final report. And Mike Woolley with VSG standing here is with us here today, and when I'm done, I'm going to invite him up to talk about the work that they did and to explain the report in more detail. So thank you for being here, Mike. And I most certainly want to remind people of my colleagues here, Tim Clare with the Board of Regents and Carl Eskridge with the City Council. The three of us, of course, are the board of the West Haymarket Joint Public Agency. We're pleased to tell you up front with respect to the report that it confirms that the facility is being well managed, and importantly, that our revenues and our financing are solid. High-quality events are being attracted to Lincoln. Consequently, economic opportunity and development is booming in the Haymarket and across the city. The big picture is very positive, with more than enough funds for SMG to operate the arena and to pay JPA operating costs and to pay the bond debt. Revenue from occupation taxes is much higher than projected at this point, and the arena operation itself continues to generate revenue far beyond its operating expenses. Let me make that point again. The arena operation itself generates more revenue than its operational expenses. There's been confusion about this, and today I'm going to take a little extra time to try to clarify this point, but let me back up just a little bit to the main source of revenue for all of this, the occupation tax. Our major source of revenue for arena bond debt payments comes from the occupation tax on the hotels, car rentals, bars, and restaurants. These industries have seen tremendous growth here in Lincoln, thanks in large part to the arena operation. We based our arena financing on a conservative estimate of 2% annual growth in occupation tax revenues. Since 2012, when this all began, however, we have experienced over 7% annual growth, and that puts us a full 10 years ahead of projections. Occupation tax collections for 2015 were $15.3 million, an amount we were not projected to reach until 2025. Our fund balances continue to grow and to keep the arena project on a very solid financial footing. Now let me talk a little bit about that part of the arena operations that are managed by SMG. Last year, activity at the arena generated a total of $6.8 million. That revenue comes from a number of things, including ticket sales and food and beverage sales, sponsorships, premium seating, and more. We do count Pinewood Bowl concerts in the revenue and expenses because it's operated by the same company under the same contract. However, Pinewood Bowl represents less than 3% of all SMG revenues, so it's not a major factor. Added together, the arena generates $6.8 million of gross revenue each year. $6.8 million. So what are the expenses to operate the arena? SMG arena operational expenses last year totaled about $5 million. As you can see, arena revenues outpaced expenses by approximately $1.8 million. The arena is not losing money. Clearly, the SMG arena operation makes money. So what happens to the money that the arena generates? That $6.8 million. Roughly 50% of that goes to the JPA directly. And 50% of it goes to the SMG arena operations. Why do we do it this way? Because when we set up the original financing plan to build the arena, we knew that our top budget priority for any revenue was to ensure that debt service is paid. Just like your family home, we have to make sure the mortgage is paid before addressing other bills. While the occupation tax is the major source of revenue that pays off the bond debt, we in fact created a built-in suspenders plan by adding certain arena revenues to the payment of the debt service. By having the JPA control the money, we are able to ensure that debt service is being addressed first, and taxpayers, by that mechanism, better protected overall. With that priority accomplished, the JPA is able, at its discretion, to return extra revenues back to the arena. Some in the community want to call that a subsidy. I disagree. This is money generated by SMG at the arena, collected by the JPA, and then returned to SMG in part. This is not a subsidy. The JPA collection structure has been very successful in ensuring that debt payment finances are in great shape. We always anticipated from the setting up of the first legal structure that we might return a portion of the arena revenue, an operational increment, if you would, back to MSG operations, and the VSG report confirms that this does not negatively impact our debt service on JPA operations. The operational increment proposed for the JPA's 2014-15 budget is $650,000, and that will continue in varied amounts year after year. This system is sound and prudent and will continue into the future. In addition to our sound financial position, the VSG report indicates that our arena management policies and practices fall squarely in line with the 4 peer communities that operate arenas. VSG explored specific items and suggestions on how to improve. We just received the final report, and we welcome the opportunity to continue to review the report, to share it with the community, and to discuss all ways to adjust revenue sources and enhance customer experiences. The bottom line remains, Pinnacle Bank Arena is an outstanding community asset. It is a big part of becoming a world-class city and is a success we should all be proud of. So with that, I'm going to ask Mike Woolley with Venue Solutions Group to come up and tell us more about his report, and then we'll ask my colleagues on the board to comment if they so choose, and then we'll answer your questions. So Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We were engaged to take a look at the facility operations, not just from a financial standpoint, but also from an operational standpoint, because it's extremely important that just looking at the financial piece is just one facet, but also as the stakeholders in the community, you should have a good understanding of how the facility is being maintained each and every day, with the understanding that as you operate these facilities, you want to do certain things that allow you to hopefully extend the life of the facility. So these types of facilities a few years ago, you'd think if you got 30 years out of them, that you would have gotten everything you needed out of the asset. But now, because of how much they cost, the idea is let's make incremental investments in the facilities that we hopefully can get 40 years out of these facilities. So it's important as a part of the analysis that we take note of how SMG is maintaining the facility and if they have the proper procedures and policies in place that are according to what we consider industry best practices. And so we spent several days on site doing a lot of interviews and really taking a hard look at the condition of the facility. And we took that information and then we compiled a list of comparable facilities. You'll see in the report that we have 4 that we've identified. And based on every metric from a financial standpoint, as the mayor said, the facility is performing quite well. Each one of those facilities has their challenges as it relates to certain revenue streams that are earmarked for debt service, just as you guys have, but you perform very, very well. It is a busy building. And based on the peer group, you're overperforming based on the other facilities. From an operational perspective, the facility is well maintained, it's clean. The staff that SMG has cares very deeply about the presentation of the facility, and that came out in several of the interviews, especially when we were talking with the university. They feel that they have a very good experience when they are playing their games in the arena as well. So, there was nothing. We can always get better at what we do, and I think SMG, and there are certain aspects of the report that we have brought to the fore that there are certain things that they can work on. But you've got a great facility in your community, and as long as you continue to do the things that you're doing, I think this facility is going to serve the market very, very well. You've done a lot of different events in this community, and I continue, SMG and Tom, I think, strive to continue to improve on that every day. And so there was nothing that was of any major significance that was alarming as it relates to the report. But I think you should be proud of the way that the facility is being presented, and just continue to be diligent and work hard to try to generate as much event activity as you can. But it is, I can't reiterate the fact that this is a well-performing building, and based on the report and the comparable data, that proves to be the case. So.
Okay, Tim, did you want to make a few remarks?
Well, I appreciate the report, and I appreciate what work went into illustrating what we on the JPA have I think said all along, and that the project itself is done very well financially. And a point that I think is also important to make is out of cash flow, while our balances are very, very high and ahead of where we projected, that also includes monies being taken out for future maintenance on the project. It also includes monies being given back to the operation to help the financing of the operation itself, and we still end up having debt service capability well in advance of where we are right now on the calendar. So that just shows, I think, good setup from the very start. It shows that we have a good manager with Tom running the facility, and it shows that things are happening in Lincoln that are enabling this project to fully benefit the entire community. So I appreciate the report, and I appreciate obviously we appreciate the results too.
Carl?
Sure, thank you. I'm the new guy on the board. The last 4 years, we've had 4 different city council representatives on the JPA, and I've been there all of 2 months. And it's, so I'm learning. But like everyone in the community, we have read and we've heard concerns about the performance of the arena and how we're operating. And so this evaluation really came at a perfect time. It was a great time for me personally to be able to dig in and understand more about the operations of the arena, to know how we're performing, to have the sense of assurance from professionals who work in this field all the time, how we measure up at Pinnacle Bank Arena, and we measure up very, very well. That was very reassuring, and look forward to doing some further things to help stabilize our performance and make it even stronger, and look forward for a great arena in the future. Thank you.
Okay, let's take your questions now, and I'm going to ask Steve Hupka, who is the city's essentially chief financial officer, to come help us answer detailed questions on that side. And Tom Lorenz, congratulations, Tom, on a great report. And we'll ask you to help us with detailed questions on the operations side. So let's open it up for questions.
When there was first discussion about the arena being built and how it would be financed and how it would be operated, there was no indication at that time that there would need to be a sharing of this revenue that went to the JPA. We were always told that the operations would be in the black. The first budget said that. Did you not understand at the time that the JPA was taking too much of the advertising and seat prices?
Well, I think it's fair to say at the beginning that we were all dealing with a huge operation that we didn't understand 100% in terms of anybody having experience outside of Tom, of course. And I think we approached it very conservatively. We approached it very conservatively in terms of providing adequate sources of revenue for the entire project. We approached it very conservatively in terms of keeping most of the revenue streams tightly in the control of the city until such time it was shown that it was needed to be shared with S&G or other entities. I think that was the right approach. And I think that as it's turned out, it was a wise approach. If you look back at the documents that were created at the time, Nancy, that this was all established, you'll find an operation and maintenance fund listed, and we were prepared to make these kinds of transfers if it became necessary to do so. In our optimism, I think we all hoped that we wouldn't have to do much of that until later years, but it didn't turn out that way. But that doesn't mean that mistakes were made. It doesn't mean that we made any bad judgments at all, because everything is playing out in a way that, if not fully anticipated, certainly the possibility was anticipated and provided for in all the documents, and provided for in terms of the amount of revenue streams that were put in place to service the overall problem of debt service, JPA operational budget, and SMG operational budget. I don't see how we can be faulted in any way for the overall structure and the way everything has played out.
And I have another question. I know that there's some kind of a computer run that Don Hurst did that kind of makes a bunch of assumptions and takes all the revenue and says you'll have enough money to pay off the debt and do this into the future. Looking at the revenue stream now with the occupational tax higher, can JPA sustain $650,000 money going to the arena operations every year? When you start
It
having
can, but I'm
payoff,
gonna let
yeah.
Steve talk about that model.
Yeah, that model is kept by Don, as you acknowledge here. It's updated every year, and I've got an updated version of it here for you with that operational increment in it. And it goes out until year 2032. Accounts for all the principal payments due, everything that we know of at this time, and it assumes a similar operational increment going out through that whole period of time. And the lowest balance that we get to, and that's out in 2028 or 2026, is $34.2 million. And that's after all expenses are paid and all bond payments are made. So the projections are still looking very, very good. And it still has a very conservative projection for the growth of the occupation tax, which is 2%. And as the mayor mentioned, it's doing much better than that recently. But it's still based on a conservative projection of our biggest revenue source.
Andy?
After seeing the report, are you gonna make any changes? Is there anything that you would change or recommend changing in either the financial structure or the operation of Pinnacle Bank?
I think it's a great question, it's a fair question, and it's a question that's a little bit premature for us in the sense that we just got the final version of the report. And as you know, the press has wanted to have this very quickly, and we have accommodated the press. But you have to give us a little break here and give us a little time to digest the report and talk to people and think about it and make some decisions. But certainly, with regard to certain things going forward, we will make some changes because they were things that, to some extent, we had in the on the runway anyway, but recommendations with regard to the long-term care of the building and bringing together a plan.
Yeah, we've got specific recommendations
Yeah.
we have specific recommendations in the report that, you know, look at food service and some of the long-term planning as it relates to capital, how you determine where you're going to spend your capital dollars. And so there is some specificity in the report relative to some things that SMG and the JPA can look at on a go-forward basis.
What about the alcohol at university sales? Do you take anything from this report that will change your view on that or make a push to?
Why don't you describe what you said about the alcohol sales? They basically gave the
Yeah,
pros and cons of it.
Right. We really focused on where the trends are in alcohol in collegiate facilities, both on campus and off campus. And so what we did was just shed some light on where the trends are going. Specifically in the last year, what some facilities or what some universities have done, and you're seeing the trend move more and more towards serving alcohol in collegiate facilities, both on campus and off campus. So the report really gets into where the trends are going, not advocating one aspect or the other, but just where the trends are heading in that regard.
You talked about in the report some of the, I guess how you mitigate problems with alcohol served in them. Can you discuss that a little bit?
Well, I think one of the reasons why you're seeing more and more activity and decisions to go in that direction is because facility operations, both on campus and off campus, have become more, I would call it more professionalized, and the ability to manage the risk management part of serving alcohol in your venue certainly has become a lot easier, I think, to manage. And so you're seeing more and more entities decide that they're going down that road because they can manage that aspect, and it's really risk management.
You said just premium seating, not general seating. Why is the breakdown? What's the,
Really, it really depends. I mean, and you're right, there is the premium portion and the public portion. And it really just philosophically depends on the direction that you want to go. But in some aspect, you're seeing you know, a lot of it happening in the premium. Now the question becomes, do we serve it from, in the public areas? And so you're seeing more and more of it going towards serving it in the public areas of those facilities.
I guess why was the rationale, just not to open it up to everybody, but, you know, in those particular venues, just to open it up to premium first, I guess?
No, typically they have done, it's really been open to premium first. If you see most of those, either the collegiate departments themselves or the venues, they typically start in the premium areas and then would transition into a public space.
Mayor, is the city
think that-
prepared to ask for the university to consider making the change, at least for the premium seating areas, or?
But, you know, at this point, again, I would say that it's premature. I think we want to consider everything and consider opinions of a lot of other people before we start talking about it. If you want to really see quickly the strength of the trend, I suggest you turn to page 35 of the report. It's pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
But without financial, I mean, you're saying that the bank isn't, you know, the arena isn't fine, you know, fiscal shape. Why would you wanna do that? I mean, why would there be any impetus to gain more revenue from alcohol if your bank, you know, the arena's
Well,
already?
I guess you're making the assumption that gaining revenue from alcohol is a bad thing. I don't make that assumption. And not making that assumption, why would I not feel that giving the taxpayer more security by having more revenue would not be a good thing?
Is the reason why premium seating is offered alcohol first is because they assume that they're all 21 and older? As opposed to the public?
Does anybody have an
student
opinion on
section?
that?
Well, I think the reason they do it is that, you know, they've paid a lot of money to lease those spaces, and it's about having all of the amenities available to your donors or your suite holders. And so I think it's more about what they want as a leasee or somebody who's investing in a high dollar purchase more than anything, I believe.
Mr. Woolley has a plane to catch, so we have time for maybe just a couple more questions.
Well, I do need a clarification, and I was gonna wait until the end, but on page 35, the line that begins, based on our research of the 65 member institutions that comprise the Power Five conferences, 36 of the 37 institutions allowed alcohol in at least their suite and club areas. I'm a little confused by the 65 and the 37.
Well, what it is that of the total 65, we were able to get information on 37 of the 65, and so that's what we were conveying.
So you don't know about the other, you know,
And-
what, 28?
Not at this point, no.
And do you know if any of those 36 that do allow in the private suite club areas, if they do also allow in the public seating areas? If any of those do you know?
Some do, yes,
Some do.
yes.
You're not sure how many?
No, but some do.
Okay, and can I get a spelling on your last name?
Yeah,
or-
Wooley,
And your title?
partner.
And the report says that the food and beverage revenues were significantly under projection. How much is Pinnacle Bank competing with the surrounding restaurants and bars? Is that
They compete they compete a lot. I think depending on the timing of the event, if it's an afternoon event or a night event, can have a significant impact on whether your patron is going to purchase food and beverage during an event. It does have an impact.
The report indicated there's a certain hypocrisy with the special designated licenses. Is it your recommendation that the city council reduce those?
Well, I think it's something that you can look at on a go-forward basis that would help the manager optimize revenue and event activity as much as possible.
Something else, is the city going to look at allowing the arena to have more of the football watching open houses?
I'm sure that will be an ongoing discussion as a result of this, of this study also.
Mr. Woolley will be back next Thursday. The JPA meets, I think it's 2 o'clock. And so he will be back in town for that, if you have more questions at that time. And then I think a few other folks can stick around for a little bit and answer more detailed questions.
Tim, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
As a regent, I mean, you guys would make any final decision on whether or not to allow alcohol at any Husker games. I mean, does this report, at all sway you one way? And then what would be your determining factor of what you would consider if you would, when making that particular decision?
Well, first of all, we put the West Haymarket Joint Public Agency together as a partnership. And so the mayor and I and Carl have had exactly no communication or conversations about anything relative to alcohol sales. And as partners, we need to go back to our respective organizations and have a discussion there. So I assume the mayor's going to have a discussion. We're more than likely going to have a discussion at the board level. And that discussion will discuss, among other things, policy, because quite frankly, we have never discussed the issue of alcohol at a university event. So we've got to have some of those discussions. Again, there's a lot of moving parts on this, on the offering of alcohol at a university function, like basketball games. So we'll just need to start the discussion if that's in fact what my colleagues want to do, what my partners want to do on the JPA, and if that's their desire, we'll have the discussion and then try to reach a decision one way or the other.
I guess for you personally, not speaking for the Board of Regents, but for you personally, what's that line,
I haven't put a lot of thought towards it. There's certainly the idea that this is a collegiate game played by amateur athletes, that there's a purity, and at Nebraska there's a purity of the game, as there is at other venues. I've gotten emails from people that have said that concerns them. There's also others that say, gosh, that would be enhance the fan experience to have alcohol. So we're hearing it from all sides. We have not had a discussion as of yet, and I haven't even begun to form an opinion one way or the other as to which direction I would suggest or where my vote would go.
Tom, are you able to stick around for a little bit? And Steve, are you able to stick around? Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks. Good report.
Thanks for coming over, I appreciate that.
Self-time.